Rain hammered the glass tower on the morning everything changed. I remember it because I have always loved the rain. 40 floors of steel and ambition rose above the city, and at the very bottom, in a service corridor most people never saw, I pushed my mop in slow, steady circles. My name is Walter Briggs. I was 79 years old that morning. For 19 years I had cleaned those floors before the lights came on, and for 19 years almost no one had learned my name. I did not mind. I had learned long ago that the most important work is often the quietest. I moved through the lobby while the city still slept, wiping fingerprints from the brass, straightening the chairs, emptying the bins. I hummed an old song under my breath, a tune from a country far away, and a year I had spent most of my life trying to bury. The marble shined under my hands. I took pride in that shine. A floor done right, I have always believed, is a small act of respect for everyone who will walk across it and never know your name. The company was called Meridian Dynamics. It built software that moved billions of dollars around the world, and that year it had a new leader, a young man named Preston Vale. He was 34 years old. He had bought his way to the top with a fortune handed down to him and a hunger that never seemed to rest. He wore suits that cost more than I earned in a month. He spoke of disruption and synergy and shareholder value. He believed, with the certainty of a man who has never once been tested, that the worth of a person could be read off a balance sheet. He had been in charge for only 6 weeks. In those 6 weeks, he had cut 300 jobs, canceled the holiday bonus, and replaced the coffee in the break rooms with something cheaper. He called these decisions bold. The people who lost their work called them something else, but they said it quietly because fear had settled over that building like the gray rain on the windows. I had seen fear settle over places before, in jungles and on frozen ridge lines, and I knew what it did to people. So I tried, in my small way, to be a warm face in the early dark. A good morning, a folded paper crane left on a sad person's desk. It was all I had to give, and I gave it. On the morning everything changed, Preston arrived earlier than usual. He had a board meeting at 9, and he wanted the executive floor to look perfect. He stepped out of the elevator at 6:45, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, and he nearly walked straight into me. I was kneeling beside a potted plant, picking up the soil that had spilled when the cracked container finally gave way. He stopped. He looked down at me the way a man looks at a stain on his shoe. I looked up and smiled at him the way I smiled at everyone. "Good morning, sir," I said. "Watch your step there. I will have this cleaned up in just a moment." He did not answer at first. He stared at the dirt on the floor, at the worn knees of my uniform, at the slight tremor in my old hands. Then he spoke, and his voice was cold. "Why is there dirt on my floor?" he said. "Why is an old man crawling around in front of the elevator where my clients can see him?" I rose slowly, one hand on the wall for balance. "The pot fell, sir," I said. "I am cleaning it up. It will be gone before anyone arrives." He shook his head. He set his coffee on the reception desk and crossed his arms. I had met men like him before. I knew, even then, what was coming. "How old are you?" he asked. 79, I said. 79. He let the number hang in the air like an accusation. "And how long have you worked here?" 19 years, sir, I said. "Since before the new building." He nodded slowly, as though I had confessed to a crime. 19 years pushing a mop, he said. "Do you know what this company pays in insurance for a man your age? Do you know what the liability is if you slip on one of these floors you are so proud of? You are a risk, old man. You are a number that does not add up." I said nothing. I have heard cruelty before, in places this young man could not begin to imagine. So I simply waited. The patient learn to wait. Men who have already looked death in the face learn it better than anyone. "I am going to do you a favor," he said. "I am going to let you go before you hurt yourself. Effective today. Clean out your locker. Human Resources will mail you whatever you are owed. Consider it early retirement." A young woman from the front desk, a receptionist named Danny, had just arrived and was hanging up her coat. She froze, listening. 2 security guards near the door looked at the floor and pretended not to hear. No one spoke. No one ever spoke when Preston decided to remove a person. I looked at him for a long moment. I was not angry. I want you to understand that because it matters to the rest of this story. I felt no anger toward that young man. What I felt was sadness, not for myself, for him. I had known too many people who mistook power for strength, and it had never once ended well for them. So I nodded. "If that is your decision, sir," I said, "then I will go. But let me finish cleaning this first. A job half done is no job at all." He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Leave it," he said. "We will hire someone younger, someone who will not cost me a fortune in medical bills. Get your things and get out." I set down my rag. I looked around that lobby one last time, at the marble I had polished for 19 years, at the brass that gleamed because of my hands. Then I straightened my back, and for just a moment the trembling stopped, and I stood the way I had once stood a long time ago. I saw him take half a step back without seeming to know why. "Thank you for 19 good years," I said. I did not say it to him. I said it to the building, to the work itself, to the small dignity of a floor done right. Then I turned and walked toward the service corridor to gather my coat. And that should have been the end of it. A rich man fired a poor man, and the world went on, the way it so often does. But the young receptionist had seen something in my eyes that she could not let go of. And in the days that followed, she pulled a single thread that unraveled everything that young man believed about himself and about me. I went home that morning to a small apartment on the east side of the city. The building was old, the paint was peeling, and the elevator had not worked in years, so I climbed 4 flights of stairs slowly, resting at each landing. Inside, my rooms were clean and spare. A narrow bed, a worn armchair, a small kitchen table with 2 chairs, though I only ever needed one. On the wall hung a single photograph, faded with age, of a group of young men in uniform standing in front of a wall of green jungle. I am among them, impossibly young, my arm around a friend who never came home. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window and watched the rain. I was not bitter. Bitterness, I decided long ago, is a poison you brew for your enemies and then drink yourself. I had lost the job, yes, and that small paycheck mattered more than I like to admit. But I had lost far greater things in my life, and I had learned how to keep walking. I would find another way. I always had. What I did not know, sitting there with my tea, was that the world was about to remember me. Let me tell you the part I never told anyone in that building. The part I had spent 50 years trying not to talk about. It began long ago, in a war on the other side of the world, in a year when I was just 19 years old. I did not want to go. No one truly wanted to go. But I went, because my country called, and because the boys from my town went, and I believed, in the simple way of the young, that you do not let your friends walk into danger alone. They sent me to a small unit in the highlands, a place of steep ridges and dense jungle and rain that never seemed to stop. We called it the Green Hell. The fighting there was close and brutal and often invisible. The enemy moved like smoke through the trees. You could walk a trail 100 times and on the 101st vanish in a flash of fire. I was a quiet soldier. I did not boast. I did not seek the front. But something happened to me in those first months, something I did not choose and did not understand. When fear took hold of the unit, when the noise and the chaos froze the other young men in place, I did not freeze. Something in me went still and calm, and I moved through the worst of it, as though I had decided, somewhere I could not name, that whatever happened would happen, and the only thing left to control was whether I helped the man beside me. By my second year, they had made me a sergeant. The men under me were even younger than I was, frightened boys from farms and small towns who had never been far from home. I learned all their names. I learned where they came from and who they loved and what they hoped to do if they ever made it back. I wrote letters for the ones who could not find the words. I shared my rations with the ones who went hungry. I sat awake on the long nights with the ones who could not stop shaking. They did not just follow me. They trusted me. And in a war that took so much, That trust was the only armor any of us truly had. Then came the night the history books would later call the Forgotten Stand. I never called it that. To me, it has only ever had 9 names, the names of the boys I did not bring home. It was the rainy season, and they sent my platoon to hold a small hill that overlooked a vital supply road. The hill was numbered 529 on the maps, and it did not look like much, a muddy rise crowned with shattered trees. But whoever held it controlled the road, and the road fed an entire division. I had 40 men. We were told to hold for 2 days until a larger force could relieve us. The relief did not come in 2 days, it did not come in 3. A great storm swept the region, grounding the helicopters, turning the roads to rivers of mud. And on the 3rd night, in the dark and the rain, the enemy came in numbers no one had expected. Not a patrol, not a probe, an entire battalion, hundreds of soldiers moving up the slopes of that hill to take the road. I had 40 men, and not enough ammunition, and no way out. I will not pretend I was not afraid. I was. Anyone who tells you a brave man feels no fear is lying to you or has never been there. Fear is not the opposite of bravery. Bravery is being afraid and holding the line anyway. I gathered my frightened boys in the mud and the dark, and I told them the truth. I told them help was coming, but not yet. I told them we would have to hold, and I told them that if we fought smart and we fought together, we could do the impossible. Then I tried to show them how. I moved along the line all night, from position to position, never resting, going wherever the fear was thickest. When a young soldier panicked, I put a steady hand on his shoulder. When a position was overrun, I went into the worst of the fighting and pulled the wounded back, and held the gap with my own body when there was no one else. The men told me later that I seemed to be everywhere at once. They told me I did not sleep for 3 days. I do not remember sleeping. I remember the faces. I will always remember the faces. There is a story the survivors told for years afterward, one that never made it into any official account, and I will tell it to you because it is the truest thing I know about what those days were. On the 3rd night, when the rain came down like a wall, a young soldier named Carl became separated from the line. He had crawled forward to drag back a wounded friend and lost his bearings in the dark, and he found himself alone, somewhere between our line and the enemy. He lay there in the water, certain he was about to die, too afraid even to move. I went out after him. I will not call it brave. He was mine to look after, and so I went. I crawled out into that same killing ground, and I called his name softly, so the enemy would not hear, and I followed the sound of his ragged breathing until I found him in the mud. I put my hand on his back. "I have got you," I whispered. "You are not alone. We are going home together." And I pulled him back, inch by inch, through the mud and the fire, to the line. Carl lived to be an old man. He named his first son Walter. He told that story at every birthday and every holiday for the rest of his life, and he always ended it the same way. He said he had learned in the worst hour of his life what it means to have a man come looking for you in the dark. I do not tell you that to make myself sound like something. I tell you because I want you to understand. That is the only kind of soldier I ever wanted to be. Not a man who sought glory. A man who came looking for you in the dark. On the 2nd day, our radio was destroyed, and with it, our only way to call for the relief that was crawling toward us through the mud. Without our coordinates, the rescue force could not find us, and dared not bring artillery for fear of hitting their own men. I understood what that meant. It meant someone had to get to high ground, in the open, under fire, and signal our position by hand. It was very nearly a death sentence. I did not ask any of my men to do it. I went myself. Under the gray morning light, I climbed to the exposed crest of that hill with a signal panel and a flare in full view of the enemy below, and I marked the position of my platoon so the relief force could find us. I was hit twice doing it, once in the arm and once in the side. I carry those scars still, but I held the panel steady, and I lit the flare, and far away through the rain a spotter saw it, and the tide began, very slowly, to turn. For one more day and one more night we held. When the ammunition ran low, We gathered what the fallen no longer needed. When the enemy came through the wire in the dark, the fighting was hand to hand, and somehow the line did not break. I carried wounded men down the slope on my own back, one after another, and then I climbed again into the fire. And here is the thing I want you to know. The boys who had been so frightened 3 days before fought like lions. Not because of me, because of each other. Because the man beside them would not quit, and they could not bear to quit on him. That is the whole secret of it. That is everything I ever learned about strength. On the 4th morning, the relief force broke through. They found a hill that should have fallen days before, still held by a handful of exhausted, bloodied men. Of the 40 who had started, 31 of us were still alive. Against an entire battalion, against odds no one could quite believe, we had held the road and saved the division that depended on it. They told me later that the lives saved numbered in the thousands. I have never known what to do with a number like that. I only know the number 9, the 9 who did not come down the hill. When they asked me how I had done it, I never had an answer that satisfied them. I only said that the men were mine to look after, and so I looked after them. I asked about the 9. I learned every one of their names, and I have carried them every day since. For what happened on that hill, they gave me the Medal of Honor, the highest decoration my country could give. I stood in a great hall in a borrowed dress uniform and let an important man place the ribbon around my neck, and the whole time I thought only of the 9 boys who should have been standing beside me. I never wore that medal again. I put it in a drawer, and I came home, and I tried, the way so many of us tried, to build an ordinary life out of a heart that had seen too much. The medal did not make the nights easier. I came home to a country that did not always know what to do with the men it had sent away. There were no parades for me. I stepped off a plane into a quiet airport and carried my single bag out into a world that had moved on without me. For a while, I was lost. The war did not stay on the other side of the ocean. It followed me home, into my sleep, into the sudden cold sweat of a loud noise, into the long gray afternoons when the faces of the 9 would rise up before me and ask without words why I had lived and they had not. I drank, for a time, the way many of us drank, trying to drown those voices. I drifted from one job to another. I lost a marriage to a good woman who could not reach me through the walls I had built, and I do not blame her, not for one moment. I blamed the war, and then I blamed myself, and slowly, over many hard years, I learned that blame is just another poison. I stopped drinking, and I found, in the simple rhythm of honest work, a kind of peace that no medicine had ever given me. A floor to mop, a window to clean, a small task I could finish completely and leave better than I found it. In a life that had once spun out of all control, the work gave me something I could hold on to. That is why I clean those floors and why I clean them well. It was never beneath me. It saved me. I never had children of my own in the end, and few people who knew my name. But I kept a habit I had learned on that hill of looking after whoever happened to be next to me. The frightened receptionist whose mother lay in a hospital bed. The new young man who did not yet know how to make the brass shine. They were all in their way, my boys and my girls. I had simply never stopped being the sergeant who could not bear to let the person beside him face the dark alone. That was the man Preston Vale fired for getting dirt on his floor. He did not know any of it. How could he? I never told a soul. But the young woman at the front desk, Danny, could not stop thinking about my face, about the calm in it, about the way I had thanked the building on my way out. She had been kind to me for 2 years, and I had been kind to her, and when her mother was in the hospital, I had left a folded paper crane on her desk every morning for a week, a small gift of hope folded from the colored paper I kept in my cart. She had kept everyone. And she had once, very early in the morning, seen the old scars on my forearm, and had wondered, and had never asked. That evening, after the building emptied, she typed my name into a search engine. She told me all of this later, sitting at my kitchen table, so I can tell it to you now. She added the word, veteran, and the screen changed. The first thing she found was an article from a military history archive and a black and white photograph of a young soldier with the same eyes she saw every morning, and beneath it, my name, Sergeant Walter Briggs. She read for 2 hours. She read until her hands shook. And she could not understand how a man who had done those things had been emptying her trash can every morning for less money than that company spent on bottled water. So in the morning, she did something braver than she knew. She rode the elevator to the 40th floor, and she would not leave until they let her see the man who had fired me. I was not there for what happened in that office, but Preston told me himself later every word of it, because he needed me to hear that he had not forgotten a single moment of his own shame. Danny put the printed article on his desk, the photograph facing up. He almost pushed it aside. He did not want to be bothered by a receptionist, but something in the young soldier's eyes in that old photo held him, the same calm that had made him step back in the lobby without knowing why. He began to read. He read about the 40 men and the battalion. He read about the radio and the exposed crest and the flare. He read about the wounds and the 31 who came home because one man would not quit. He read the words Medal of Honor and the number of lives that one stand had saved, and the color drained out of his face. When he finished, he sat very still for a long time. "The same man," he finally said. "The same man I fired yesterday." "For the dirt." "Yes," Danny told him. "He folds paper cranes for people when they are sad. He is the kindest person in this whole building, and you threw him away because of his age and a little soil from a broken pot." He walked to the window and looked out over the city I had once crossed an ocean to defend, and for the first time in a very long time, he told me, he felt deeply and truly ashamed. He thought of his own life, the fortune handed to him, the doors that had opened because of his name. He had never been tested. He had never held a line. He had never carried a wounded friend down a hill on his back. He had built his pride on a foundation of nothing, and an old man with a mop had just shown him exactly how empty that pride was. "I have to find him," he said. "I have to make this right." "It will take more than money," Danny told him. "A man like that does not want your money. If you go to him, go to apologize. Go because it is right, not to fix your image." So they came to me. The two of them climbed the 4 flights of stairs to my door because the elevator did not work, and the young chief executive who trained with a trainer 3 times a week was out of breath by the 3rd landing. I think he was doing the arithmetic in his head of an old man climbing those stairs every day after a full shift of hard work. I opened the door in my old cardigan with a dish towel over my shoulder. If I was surprised to see the man who had fired me standing in my hallway, I tried not to show it. I just stepped back and opened the door wider. "You had better come in," I said. "The tea is just about ready." We sat at my small table, the one with 2 chairs, though I only ever needed one. I poured them tea and offered them the last of a packet of biscuits, and when Danny protested, I insisted, because a guest must always be fed. Preston looked around my spare rooms, at the narrow bed and the worn armchair and the single photograph on the wall, and he did not seem to know how to begin. So I began for him. "You found out," I said. It was not a question. I always wondered if anyone ever would. I never spoke of it. The men who deserve to talk about that hill are the 9 who did not come home. It never felt right to me, taking the credit while they lay in the ground. He opened his mouth and found that his voice would not work. He tried again. "Mr. Briggs," he said. "Sir, I came here to apologize. What I did was cruel and ignorant and wrong. I judged you by your age and your uniform, and I never once bothered to see you. I have not seen any of the people who work for me. I have been a fool, and worse than a fool. I am so deeply sorry." I listened without interrupting. When he was finished, I turned my teacup slowly in my hands, and I told him the truth. "I was not angry with you," I said. "When you fired me, I was not angry. I was sad, but not for myself. I was sad for you. Because I have known men like you before. Young men with everything and nothing. Men who have never been tested, and so they come to believe that strength is the power to hurt people. But that is not strength, son. Anyone can fire a man. Anyone can hurt the people below them. That is the easiest thing in the world. Real strength is what you do for people when there is nothing in it for you. Real strength is staying when it would be easier to run. He sat there, and I could see the words land somewhere deep in a place money had never reached. On that hill, I told him, and I felt myself looking through the wall, and across 50 years and an ocean, I learned what a person is really worth. It is not the medal. It is not the rank. It is whether the man next to you can count on you when everything is falling apart. That is all that has ever mattered to me. When I cleaned your floors, I was not ashamed. A floor done well is a gift to every stranger who walks across it and never knows your name. I gave that gift gladly. The work was honest. I was proud of it. Danny was crying quietly by then. I could see that the young man's eyes were wet too, and I think that surprised him more than anything. I do not want my forgiveness to be a burden to you, I told him. People make mistakes. The measure of a person is not that they never fall. It is what they do after. So I will tell you what I told my boys on that hill when they thought all was lost. It is not over. You can still choose who you are going to be. For a long moment, no one said anything. Then he reached across that small table and took my scarred hand in both of his, and he held it, and he said thank you, and I believed him. I do not want you to think the whole world changed in an afternoon. It does not work that way. But that young man did change, slowly, the way change really happens. He went back to that tower, and he did not announce some grand new program. He started small. He learned the names of the cleaning staff. He learned the names of the people in the mailroom and the cafeteria and the parking garage. He brought back the holiday bonus and the good coffee. And when he made a decision now, he asked himself a question he had never once asked before. He asked what it would cost the people, and not only what it would save on the page. There was a woman in that cafeteria named Rosa, who had worked there almost as long as I had, ladling soup and wiping counters, learning, like me, to be invisible. He had walked past her 1,000 times and never once seen her face. Now he learned her name. He learned she was raising 2 grandchildren on her wages, that she came in before dawn and stayed past dark, that she had not taken a sick day in 11 years even when she should have. He made sure she was paid what the work was truly worth. And he told me that when Rosa cried at the news, he finally understood that he had spent his whole life surrounded by heroes of an ordinary kind, and had been too proud and too blind to see a single one of them. He offered me my old job back, of course, but he did something more. He made a new position, a real one, with real pay and the dignity I suppose I had earned 100 times over. And he asked me to do something I never expected. He asked me to come and speak to the young and ambitious people of that company, to teach them what I had somehow taught him at my kitchen table, without ever meaning to teach anyone anything. I was not sure at first. I had spent 19 years being invisible, and I was comfortable there. But I thought of my boys, and I thought of the 9, and I decided that maybe there was one more line worth holding. One more group of frightened young people who needed someone to show them how to be brave in the small, daily, unglamorous ways that matter most. So once a month, I stood in the same lobby I had cleaned for 19 years, and I told them stories. Not war stories, mostly. I told them about the paper cranes. I told them about doing a small job so well that it becomes a gift. I told them that the person emptying their trash and the person signing their checks are worth exactly the same, and that any company which forgets that has already begun to die, no matter what the balance sheet says. There was one talk I will never forget. A young engineer, sharp and ambitious and a little arrogant the way talented young people sometimes are, raised his hand and asked, with a hint of a challenge in his voice, whether all of this was not a bit sentimental. The world runs on results, he said, on winners and losers. Why should a company care about the feelings of the person who takes out the trash? I only smiled. I asked him to imagine a building with no one to clean it, no one to fix the heat in winter, no one to guard the door at night. I asked him to imagine the most brilliant idea in the world, written by the smartest person alive, in a tower with no foundation beneath it. Then I told them, quietly, about a frightened 19-year-old named Tommy who could not stop shaking on our first night on that hill, who everyone, including Tommy himself, had written off as the weak one, the loser. And I told them how that same frightened boy had, on the third day, carried 2 wounded men to safety under fire after I myself had fallen and had held the left flank when the line nearly broke. The strong and the weak, I told them, are not who you think they are. You only find out who a person truly is when everything is falling apart. And by then, it is far too late to start treating them with respect. You have to do it now, before you know, because every single person is carrying a hill you cannot see. That young engineer did not have a clever answer. He stayed after the talk, and we spoke a long time, and I am told he was never quite so arrogant again. The marble in that lobby still shines, because I trained the young man who cleans it now, and I taught him to take pride in the work. And every so often, in the early morning before the crowds arrive, the young chief executive comes down 40 floors and sits with me in the quiet and drinks a cup of tea with the old janitor who turned out, in the end, to be a different kind of man than he had first assumed. He keeps one thing on his desk now, where he sees it every single day. It is a small paper crane, folded from colored paper, that I gave him. He told me that whenever the old arrogance starts to creep back, whenever he is tempted to mistake power for strength, he looks at that fragile paper bird and he remembers the morning he fired an old man for a little dirt on his floor, and he remembers everything that old man tried to teach him about what it truly means to be strong. I am an old man now, and I will not be here forever, and I have made my peace with that. I have watched the boys I served with grow gray and bent, the same boys who were so frightened on that hill, and a few of them still call me on the anniversary every year. And we do not say much, but we do not have to. We were there. We know. So let me leave you with the only thing I have ever really known to be true. The next time you walk past the person cleaning your building, the one whose name you have never learned, the one it is so easy not to see, I want you to remember me. Remember that the quietest people often carry the largest stories. Remember that you never truly know the worth of the person standing in front of you. And remember that real strength was never about the power to push someone down. It was always, only ever, about the choice to lift someone up. I saved thousands of lives on a hill on the other side of the world when I was a boy, and then I came home and spent 19 years giving people a small gift, a clean floor that they never knew came from a man who had done such a thing. I asked for nothing. I never boasted. I simply did the work, and I did it with honor, until one young man's cruelty and one young woman's courage finally dragged my story into the light against my own quiet wishes. Do not let the world tell you that the worth of a person can be read off a paycheck or a title or the lines on their face. For 19 years, the man with the biggest story in that towering glass building wore a janitor's uniform and earned less than the cost of the carpet. I knew something the powerful had forgotten. I knew that how you treat the people who can do nothing for you is the truest measure of who you really are. So if anything I've told you has moved you, do one thing for me today. See someone the world overlooks. Learn a name. Offer a kindness. Hold a line for someone who is frightened. Because somewhere out there, right now, there is another old soldier pushing a mop in the early morning quiet, carrying a story you could never imagine, waiting for just one person to finally see him, and maybe, just maybe, that person can be you.